It wasn't long before I discovered hints of a community still clinging to a semblance of normality. I found a small, disconcertingly immaculate cafe on the corner of a street that I swore had not existed when I first wandered in. The establishment was dimly lit with heavy drapes obscuring the outside world. I took a seat and ordered a cup of tea, though its flavor was peculiar, a taste of herbs I couldn't identify, tinged with bitterness that reminded me of regret. The few patrons quietly observed me, their faces etched with care and hidden mistrust. When I attempted conversation, they exchanged glances but offered only murmurs of reassurance that didn't reach my ears. Their collective silence was a conversation in itself, a tacit understanding that I was now part of something much larger and far more sinister than a mere detour on an empty road. I spent the remainder of the day wandering the town. Every building, every residue of architecture in Graven Hollow seemed imbued with the presence of those long gone but never entirely at rest. I encountered a narrow alley that stretched out like a tunnel, its walls covered in cryptic symbols and faded inscriptions, hinting at rituals performed in secret. I wondered aloud if these were the results of desperate attempts to ward off the darkness that enveloped the town, or perhaps coded instructions left by a society that had long ago abandoned any pretense of normalcy. The more I observed, the more I felt that Graven Hollow was a city of dualities, a place of eerie beauty intertwined with a pervasive atmosphere of dread. As the day wore on, I found myself drawn to a small, neglected chapel hidden behind a row of overgrown hedges. Its steeple leaned precariously, as if succumbing to the relentless weight of its own history. The door creaked open on rusted hinges, and I stepped inside. The interior, illuminated by the feeble light of stained glass windows, was a mosaic of colored fragments dancing on the ancient floor. Overturned pews, splintered and covered in dust, bore silent witness to a congregation that had long since dispersed. In the far corner, beneath a collapsed altar, I spotted a diary bound in cracked leather. Its entries were written in a spidery hand, recounting confessions of horrors witnessed, of sins committed, and of the inexorable force that had drawn souls to this accursed sanctuary. Each entry ended abruptly, as if the writer had been interrupted by the encroachment of something unnameable. Reading those entries, I felt that my own fate was entwined with the recurring lament of the town's haunted legacy. Nightfall descended like ink, and with it, the thin veneer of reason began to slip away. I returned to the mansion where I had taken shelter, but sleep eluded me. The halls were no longer silent. Distant echoes of chants and whispered invocations drifted through the corridors. I wandered from room to room, trying to discern the source of these sounds, but they always led me to a dead end, only to resume in another corner of the vast labyrinth of darkness. At times, I swore I saw doors slowly creaking open on their own accord, revealing fleeting glimpses of long-forgotten ceremonies, where silhouettes huddled around flickering candles as if in communion with forces beyond mortal understanding. In the dead of night, as I sat by the dim glow of a single candle, a realization took root in my mind. Graven Hollow was not merely ruined by time, it was a place suspended between worlds. I began to pace the floor, the rhythmic echo of my footsteps forming a staccato drumbeat against the tide of my mounting inquietude. Questions, unanswerable and maddening in their persistence, swirled in my thoughts. Had I stumbled into the wreckage of a cursed town, or was I the unwitting target of forces that toyed with existence? The line between dream and nightmare blurred as the clock ticked on toward an uncertain future. Days, or what I presumed to be days in that distorted realm, passed in a haze. I documented every anomaly, every spectral whisper and unexplained chill, scrawling frantic notes in my journal as if my sanity depended on capturing even the minutest detail. I confided in names I barely remembered, a shopkeeper behind dusty spectacles who muttered cryptic warnings about the return before vanishing into the fog, an elderly woman who sat on a stoop in a threadbare shawl, eyes brimming with both wisdom and sorrow, and a young man whose furtive glances hinted that he, too, was haunted by the secrets of Graven Hollow. Each encounter left me with more questions than answers, and the deeper I dug, the more I sensed that the town's mysteries were knitted into the very fabric of its existence. I recall one particularly harrowing evening when an unnatural storm descended upon the town. It began as a subtle shift in the sky, a foreboding bruise of violet and black that spread steadily over Graven Hollow. I took refuge in the mansion once again, certain that the ancient walls would protect me from the tempest outside. But as the first bolts of jagged lightning carved luminous scars across the heavens, I realized that no earthly shelter could contain what was coming. The wind, wild and insistent, carried with it voices. They were not the howls of nature, but distinct murmurs of lament and rage, as if the storm had stolen the voices of those long silenced by despair. I sat in the parlor, my candle trembling, in a mirror of flickering shadows, and listened as the tempest roared outside. At some point between terror and astonishment, I began to hear my own name, a whisper so soft yet undeniably insistent. I strained to listen, but the sound dissolved into the cacophony of the storm. It was then that I resolved to follow the voice, to see if it was the ghost of someone lost or the harbinger of a fate sealed long before my arrival. Clutching my journal and the single candle as my only companions, I ventured out into the night, feeling the shifting boundaries between reality and nightmare unravel beneath my very steps. The streets of Graven Hollow beneath the storm were unrecognizable. The familiar pathways twisted into new, bizarre routes that defied logic. The cobblestones, slick with rain, shined like ice under the intermittent flashes of lightning, each burst of light revealing fleeting glimpses of figures hovering at the edges of my vision, figures that vanished when I turned to look directly at them. I passed shuttered shops and broken windows that reflected deformed images of myself, a pale specter with eyes too wide with dread, ever searching, ever motionless in the moment before terror overcame me. The voice, my whispered name, drew me toward the chapel I had visited earlier. Its stained glass windows now glowed ominously, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the rain-lashed pavement. I pushed open the door and was met with an overwhelming surge of musty air, as if I had stepped into a tomb. Inside, pews lay overturned and splintered by time, and a frenzy of shadow played upon the wall, a living mosaic of shapes that moved in time to a rhythm known only to the Forsaken. At the far end of the chapel, behind the collapsed altar, I discovered something I was unprepared for, a mass of intertwined limbs, as if a crowd of invisible people were embracing an eternal torment. I staggered back in horror, tripping over broken tiles, my heart pounding so violently I feared it might burst free of my chest. I found no solace in the frantic beating of my pulse as I tried to flee the chapel, but the storm had transformed the town into a labyrinth of terror. Every turn led me deeper into corridors of doubt, where the echoes of the damned mingled with my own panicked breaths. In every abandoned doorway, I could have sworn I saw the ghost of a smile, twisted in disdain, as if mocking my futile attempts to escape fate. It was as if Graven Hollow was evolving in real time, molding itself around my deepest fears and darkest secrets. As the night dragged on and the storm raged unabated, I discovered that I was not alone in my search for answers. In an abandoned courtyard illuminated by the eerie glow of a flickering street lamp, I met another wanderer, a man whose eyes were alight with the desperate fervor of one who had danced with the shadows and returned to tell the tale. He spoke, in whisper-thin tones, a voice full of reluctant conviction that he too had been pulled into the gravity of this cursed place. His name was Marcus, and his story was as fragmented and haunted as mine. He told me of a time when Graven Hollow was known by another name, a town that thrived before an ancient power tore it from the known world. He recounted secrets gleaned from forbidden texts and half-remembered legends of dark rituals that had sealed the town's fate. Every word he uttered deepened the mystery and my rising sense of dread. Marcus and I resolved to seek refuge together in an abandoned hotel on the edge of town, a structure that appeared to defy time with its riches of a bygone era. We barricaded, ourselves inside one room, the wallpaper faded and peeling like the pages of an old manuscript. There, by the thin glow of a salvage lantern, we shared our accounts. I described the surreal experience of the mansion, the whispers in the dark, and the inexplicable presence of those who were not quite there. Marcus, in a hushed tone, recounted his own battles with the town's oppressive spirit, dreams of dark figures, spectral encounters on fog-shrouded streets, and a pervasive sense that every step he took brought him closer to an inevitable confrontation.